So today I'm going to be focusing a little more on Harley Davidson. Harley Davidson is a unique company in that it is in the same industry as General Motors and Ford, but you may not think of cars and trucks when you hear Harley. You automatically think motorcycles, which seems completely different from automobiles, but it's not. Um, Unlike its competitors during the 2008 recession, Harley was able to handle the decline better than its counterparts, who subsequently had to be bailed out, um, which I'll get to that in just a moment. Um, okay. So, as you can see here, in 2009, Harley had a drastic dip in the economic value added and the return on invested capital, which would have been during the recession. Harley was able to weather the storm back in 2008 because if you look at the weighted average cost of capital that Harley has of 5.9%, 60% of that is comes from equity, meaning Harley was able to pay its creditors even during the recession because they didn't necessarily have to pay out their equity. But what makes Harley unique in this sense is when I was looking up the dividend discount model, which we'll get to in just a minute, uh, Harley still paid dividends even through the recession by tapping into their retained earnings in order to do so. Um, so now that it's been nearly 6 years later, it's been nearly 6 years since the recession, and the weighted average cost of capital, the economic value added, and the return on invested capital have all increased. This past year, Harley was able to add $76 million in economic value, and I compared Harley to four other companies in the automotive industry, plus another company outside of that industry, and called Trex. Trexco is a wood building products firm. I compared it to Trex because they are on the complete opposite end of the spectrum and have 95% equity. Um, they pay out smaller dividends than Harley. They don't necessarily always pay their dividends. So if you look at their economic value added, they added 33 million in economic value this year, which compared to previous years is an anomaly because they stay relatively flat and stable throughout history. And I thought it was interesting just to see the large spike in EVA from this past year. So, getting into the discount dividend model, I priced the stock 1 year from now to be $52.32 based on the long term growth rate and the current stock price. Um, the other companies in the industry didn't have quite as large a growth rate. Um, and here is Trexco's discount dividend model. They have a little bit larger growth rate, but this year seemed to be an anomaly because they had such a large economic value added and more business than usual. So all in all, I decided to choose Harley because in an industry like the automotive industry, which struggled for so many years recently, they were they still paid out their dividends. Um, they continued to grow. They didn't go under. They didn't really downsize, um, even though their economic value added dropped. They still stayed above zero. So the entire time in the recession, they were able to weather the storm, weather the storm, weather the storm, and it paid off for them because in recent years they were able to improve and add some value to their company. One of the things that stood out to me through their supply chain was that they buy their tires from Michelin, and this represented 1.31% of Michelin's revenues, and it ended up being about 9% of uh, Harley's expenses, which was the largest, which was quite surprising because you think make a motorcycle, you have engines, seats, gas tanks, and for the tires to be the most expensive was kind of interesting, considering that they're in the automotive industry, which companies like GM and Ford might have a little bit easier time buying tires or not have to spend quite as much on tires because they have more. So, coming to the conclusion, I think Harley is the most feasible investment choice. Uh, they're a more stable company compared to the industry, which struggles. Um, so, I, out of the 5 companies that I did, um, would choose Harley to invest in.